exactly true. The farmer, of course, may decide to spend that money on building a new house or putting in a well or buying a car, but he or she will have the opportunity, as you say, to buy fertilizers, to buy pesticides, to do other things to further improve the maize yield. So maize yield can go up to about 8, 9, 10 tons per hectare. So our first step was from 1 to 5. The second step then, with having got these new products and got this new source of income, is to use that income to take us from 5 to the crop potential. Then, if you want to go further, that's up then to the plant breeders and other people to take it further. But at the moment, there's this huge gap which we can fill, which would greatly exceed the needs of people by 2070 or 2050, which is what the current projections are. So we're talking about, globally, people are saying we need a 70% increase in production to get to the needs to feed the world in 2050. I'm saying we could do 200, 300 or 400% if we filled that gap.
And the area that you conducted this model was in Cameroon. And what difference did it make to that community? Because the way I'm looking at it, I would think that that has a potential for employment, for perhaps even moving on from an basic entrepreneurial, to a commercial basis.
Indeed, that's exactly the case. And the model in Cameroon is now being tested in other parts of the world, as far away as the Solomon Islands, for example, in the Pacific. So the model has very wide applicability. If you like, it's a generic model which will be adopted and adapted by farmers when farmers come from different biophysical environments, different climate, different soils, different weather, and perhaps very different social systems as well. So because there's thousands of tree species that meet these kinds of food needs anywhere in the world, with the exception of Antarctic and the Arctic perhaps, anywhere in the world we can develop this kind of model, and obviously those farmers in those different places will adapt it a bit. But the basic model, I think, is broadly applicable.
Okay.
And as you say, could then lead to a revolution in terms of both food security, poverty alleviation, and the creation of rural industries and even improve national economies around the world.
And in the particular model in Cameroon, what did it mean for employment in that area, in that village or sector or whatever?
Okay. What it means for employment is that we can see this opportunity to create new cottage industries in the rural areas and in the associated local towns.
Does it mean that women are employed? Or what about young people? Because these are the two areas that I think worries every emerging
for women,
idea.
It's very appropriate for women because women are basically the people who have done the trading of these sorts of products in the past. They still do the trading. They're also usually the people that do the gathering. So it's a short step, and certainly in Cameroon we did a lot of work helping those communities to develop small businesses, small cottage industries with food processing. Now that creates a need for some basic tools and equipment, and local blacksmiths and carpenters and set up as entrepreneurs to create these bits of equipment which would then allow value adding to happen in those communities. And on top of that, then women can get it. So once a fruit like this can be kept for months rather than just a few days, then you can see that you can trade this more widely, and you can also have these available to you right across the year rather than just during the fruiting season.
Thanks, Roger. Seoma, you're an entrepreneurial farmer. What's your reaction to what Roger has just explained to us?
Yes, I like the approach. It's a bottom-up approach, given the fact that he wants to give more to these farmers. But you just mentioned something. These farmers have been existing even before the colonial times. They have been existing. They've been feeding themselves. Now, when you give them knowledge, you give them information. You try to give them, to make them understand their soil and all of that better. Yeah, very good. In my own opinion, I think that will drive more towards subsistence farming, because the interesting or fascinating thing about subsistence farming is that it helps the farmer to provide his needs, his basic needs. But we're talking about entrepreneurial farming. When we talk about entrepreneurial farming, we're looking beyond the farmer just providing his needs or the needs of his immediate environment. We're talking about empowering people. We're talking about feeding tons of, let's say in Nigeria, where I come from, we're talking about, making produce that can be taken to the Lagos market, because that's one of the biggest cities in Nigeria. And when this produce go there, it can meet up to thousands of families in the city. Yes, information is good, but where is the place of funding? How do they? We talked about, because I wrote down a few things, access to income. For a farmer to get from that subsistent level to the entrepreneurial level, where is the place of funding?
Yes.
How can he access funding to ensure that he takes it from that small scale farming to a large scale farming?
Yeah. There obviously has to be some political will here involved, and people would have to buy into the idea. But if produce can be taken from a factor of 1 to a factor of 10, and it answers food insecurity problems, not only for Africa, but probably for the rest of the world, surely that must be worth serious consideration for politicians, both federally and state-wise. Festus, what's your reaction to Roger's model?
Well, I agree with Roger's model, but I will also look at it from another perspective, just as Shema said, from the angle of funding. I look at it that the issue of funding is very key, but one thing also we should not underline is the issue of infrastructure. I've looked at some of our women in Africa, those who are in agriculture right now in Africa, more than 50% of the farmers are women. And from the interview we've had with them and our experience with them, one of their major complaints is that the process of support from inception to the end, getting the product to the market, or even getting to the end users, has been very tedious. It's not been very encouraging in the sense that from the time we get land, the lands are available in some places. Well, to get to this land, some of them have become arid, not fertile. Getting fertilizer to some of them is difficult, unless some of them are highly influential or know those people who can help them get the fertilizers. In some places where government have disbursed fertilizer to these farmers, it doesn't get to them. It's either sold by the middlemen or by the distributors, and it doesn't get to the farmers. If it gets to them, maybe at a very costly price. These are some of the problems they have. Now, they've planted this thing. Let's say they've got the land, they've planted the crops, and things are growing. Maintaining it, access to those things. And when it comes to the time of harvesting, they harvest those things, take it to the market, to the quantity and to areas where they can be exported. It's a problem. I've seen people having accidents, seen a lot of accidents on the road. I've seen tomatoes, you see food crops being destroyed. So because of poor roads, and some of them poor supply, to conserve some of this food. So some of this food, they spend days in harvesting them, in storage. They could not store them because the power is not there to help them maintain it. So there's a lot of holistic approach.
Yes, I think that Roger's approach though was very, very interesting, and he was saying it's a phased approach, and that as income is generated, then sensible decisions can be taken to add value to their farms or to invest in new methods. And I know that looking at genetically improved products or extending the life of fruits or shrubs, etc., that surely might be one way to improve the produce, the lifespan of the produce, even to a stage whereby it might even be available for export. Because one of the big problems now, you touched on, is logistics, infrastructure, roads, cost of refrigerated vehicles, etc., which is exorbitant. But if through the likes of Roger's model and his people who are constantly looking at new products and new innovative strains of the various fruits, maybe, Roger, there's a way to extend the life.
Well, I think that's exactly what we've seen in the Cameroon project. It went from 10 people in 2 villages, it's grown by itself to 10,000 farmers in 500 villages. So that's organic growth because people are adopting because they see that it works. Now, part of
That's
that,
really
part of it, I think it could apply anywhere else, and it's partly being done in Nigeria as well. But the funding question is a crucial one. So at the moment, a lot of money goes into supporting agriculture, but it isn't supporting the kind of agriculture that we're talking about. And the extension services, they're the services that used to provide farmers with information, those really have collapsed in many parts of the tropics. And that means that we have to find ways of supporting farmer training schools and all the other things, that how to use microfinance, how to improve the roads. So again, in the Cameroon system, the farmers were supported through what we call rural resource centres that provided training in the agroforestry, in the domestication of the tree crops, in the use of microfinance, in the use of helping the villages to create community committees to decide whether they wanted a new road, whether they wanted a new storehouse, whether they wanted to build a bridge with the money that they were starting to generate. So it's a way of building the whole community up from the bottom as well. Now, the cost, the unexplained cost at the moment, is how do we fund those rural resource centres? So there's this huge need to get from 10,000 farmers to 3 billion farmers. If we're going to take this model forward, we've got to have a massive capacity building exercise, and that, of course, is going to cost money, and it'll have to cost international money, it'll have to cost perhaps even money from big business. How to create this new, if you like, new revolution of how to do bottom-up agriculture and bottom-up entrepreneurism that can take those farmers. At the moment, we have 80% of the people in rural areas are subsistence farmers.
Exactly.
In this country, we have less than 1%. So we've got to get many of those people in the villages out of agriculture, into marketing, into cottage industries, into processing, into creating things that they can sell. All of that is part of what I'm considering to be this bottom-up approach to agriculture and integrated rural development.
What about people in the urban area like us?
Well, the urban areas, of course.
And I'm interested in it because I've seen the potentials. I know that if I go into farming, not just for my family, who will feel healthy, because this is, dealing with natural food, going to the farm, getting it fresh. But I'm also looking at the extra billions of people. The world population is at 7 billion or so. In the next 40 years, we are projecting about 9 to 10 billion people. So I'm looking beyond that. So what's your message for us?
I'm looking beyond that too, and that I think I've already said. I think we can, instead of having to just improve production by 70%, the urban environment.
A couple of things just...
we don't solve everything instantly.
No, but just before we close, a couple of things readily spring to mind. I would think that if economies are created in the farm areas, you'd stop young people moving to the cities, which might help solve some of the problems. But funding might be our next program.
Yes.
Because that's something I think we should apply our minds to. But the way I see life is all about taking advantage of the moment. Now, Nigerian elections are just coming up. There'll be a lot of governors looking for manifestos here, and I think that's a vote winner. If the governors can buy into this and start looking for the funding, then maybe we can start looking at some prototypes.
So, can I give you an example of this funding thing? With my own experience, I have a plot of land dedicated to farming, and I do my research. Because as a journalist, I love researching so much. It makes work easier. I did this research and I found out that what's it called, pumpkin leaf, eaten by diverse cultures not just a particular culture, which makes it more popular and more in demand. I found out that a plot of land could give me, say, 20,000, let me put it in my denomination, Nigerian currency, 20,000 naira. And I found out that if I go beyond the plot of land that I'm able to rent or even purchase some acres of land or even a hectare, I'm going to get 500,000 in return. And they say, you have to invest XYZ amounts to get 500,000 in return.
So again, we come back to funding decisions. You know, it's very interesting, Festus. You run a most fascinating project here in Scotland where you use the Scots diaspora and you're looking to help them engage perhaps one day in their motherlands. Do you see the Scots diaspora perhaps going out as ambassadors or apostles for Roger's model into sub-Saharan Africa?
In fact, many countries in Africa are expecting, they are looking forward to this type of initiatives, this type of idea. As you can see, a lot of Africans in diaspora have graduated. Some of them, they have loads of ideas on this agriculture. Some of them are veterinary doctors, they want to go into animal farming. Some have studied agri on their own, want to go into real farming, real agriculture. Now, my discussion with some governors in Nigeria, they believe that they have lands to be given. I'm pretty sure last year the governor of Benue State was here and he was ready to give land to those who can come and do farming there. And also, there are other governors, like Gombe State governor who was here as well, and he said they are ready to give land to those who want to do agriculture. The same thing also in the southern part of the country, and I'm sure the same thing applies in other areas of Africa. So it's an opportunity for Africans who want to go back home and make impact. And the governments are quite ready. From my discussion with the government of my country, some key governors are really, really very happy to give this type of
Thank you, Festus.
Yes.
Well, that's our first program here on My Africa Talks. We hope you found it enlightening. Thank you for viewing.